help me out before we start with what I want to share for this first session this afternoon. Let's kind of bring us up. Does anybody have something? Please remember something that we talked about the physical. Is there something that you don't want to forget, or something that doesn't have to be a new thought, just something that struck you this morning? Anything you want to put on the table?
You brought out the deep breathing affecting the frontal lobe,
Yes.
and that helps us with that clarity and that retaining that wisdom and
Right.
bringing it forward. Using, with grief, a lot of times maybe you are muddled, foggy, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that seemed to me, that was like, oh my goodness, rather than another drug. Deep breathing.
Yes, so simplistic.
Yes.
But there is so much power in just our breath.
Yeah.
And I love the spiritual implications of that, of breathing him in. But thank you for bringing that up. Anything else under physical that struck you?
I like the part about that we need to develop some predictability amid the chaos. Something that's set, that's just set, something that focuses you back.
Yeah.
I think being intentional about attending to physical needs, it's easy to kind of melt into, again, just sleeping all the time, or just vegetating all the time. But you really do have to be intentional about attending to that.
You do. It will never happen on accident. To borrow a definition in the book called The Intentional Family, it's a book, not a new book by any means. It's a book written by Bill Doherty. He gives example. If you put a boat in let's say St. Louis, and you want to go north, or in Texas for us, we say up. We want to go up, which is great for this definition. It's not in the book, but great. But you don't touch your oars to get there. You're not going up. If you want to go to St. Paul, you're in St. Louis, you want to go to St. Paul and you don't touch oars, you're not going north. You're not going to get what you want. You're going to end up in the Gulf with the storms, just spinning around. And so he said, you've got to know what your oars are. Explore. Where is it you want to go? And then we lay out our tools. How do I get there? What are things that have worked for other people? What are things that might work for me to get there? And then we use them. That little children's Bible story in Luke 6, the parable Jesus tells about the wise builder, the foolish builder. Jesus says, whoever hears the word and puts it into practice, that's the man who digs down deep, puts them into practice. And so for us as grievers, or even with anxiety, we don't just stop with the hard, but we acknowledge the hard. We can't pretend like the hard's not there. Part of it is to acknowledge it and then figure out, okay, I know hard, now I need to go. At lunch, I was sitting at the table with somebody in grief, and she was apologizing that she's still crying. Her daughter died 4 years ago. I said, girl, you're still brand new on the journey. My goodness, give yourself permission. I'm 12 and a half years out, and I never know. I keep a Kleenex by me every time I talk about this, because I never know. I give myself permission to cry if I'm going to cry and not cry. I don't make myself cry, not cry if I'm not. But I never know when it's going to hit me different. And today, after seeing Malaya yesterday, I thought, I wonder what it's going to be like this morning when I tell the story. I never know. But I'm not going to make up my mind in advance that I'm not going to cry. Because if I needed to, I would have demonstrated it for you. I'm not afraid to cry. We got to show up. So we've done physical. What about the last hour or 45 minutes under emotional? Anything you remember from that or want to bridge over?
The power of expression.
Okay, power of expression. Yes, there is power in expression. Yes.
I think about what you were just saying. We feel the need to be apologetic for our emotions, and so people connect to that we don't need to feel apologetic about it. I'm not saying we impose on people who may not be able to handle it. Got to kind of figure out who those are, but just saying feeling really sad right now, and that's what's happening. So just being honest about it really connects with people.
That is such a powerful point. In my office, I'm going to say 90%, but it's probably more like 99% of the people who cry will always say, I'm so sorry. I wasn't going to cry. And I have a plaque that says, apologies aren't needed for tears. Tears are welcome in this place.
Mm.
It's not just sad. It's when you know you have a safe place and you're just raw. Sometimes we just cry because we haven't expressed this before or haven't felt this safe in it before. But man, we've got to model it, don't we? Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else under emotion? I mean, if you've got anything, I want to hear it.
Along with that, I knew there was a turning point whenever I quit carrying Kleenex and I carried a handkerchief. Because Kleenex, you wear them out and you get all this
Yes.
stuff. And I knew it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. So I started carrying a cloth hanky because it's gonna happen, you know,
Yeah.
around every corner.
That's
But
right.
one thing you said that I am gonna start praying is, Lord, help me have kind eyes. I want people to know that I've been there, done that, and I want to listen, you know,
Yes.
to them if they're be ready.
Don't you know Jesus had the kindest
Oh,
eyes?
yeah.
I mean, so many of his stories, I just thought, Lord, what did your eyes look like? Oh, yeah, I know. I can just see them. Yeah, I got it. Because he was able to get by with saying some pretty strong stuff. But his eyes, yes. Anything else under physical or emotional? Anything else you got?
I got a whole page.
Okay. No, I'm not gonna go to the whole thing, but I got one thing, yeah.
But just those giving, and I know I didn't get them all the way you worded them, but just giving yourself permission.
Yes.
Because, you know, I shush myself a lot.
Yeah.
Just,
You realize you'll be plagiarized by now.
Oh, no, you know what? This stuff is just good health. It's just good health, right? For sure.
probably back under the physical, this was, I mean, I didn't get this from you, but just as somebody who's struggled with anxieties.
Yeah.
Using your senses.
Yes.
The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
That's been a helpful thing.
Yes.
For one, it helps you just take your focus off whatever is stressful in the moment. I had a coworker, I was a school nurse at a high school. We had a lot of kids with anxiety.
Mhm.
And my coworker would just, you know, a kid comes in with anxiety. She's like, suck it up, move on. And I'm like, no, I know what it feels like. It's very real. And I would usually pull them aside into a quiet place and, you know, 5 things you can see. Tell me 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, taste,
Mhm.
smell, all those things.
Yeah.
That's a helpful tool.
Absolutely. It's grounding is what we talked about this morning, and just getting your feet planted on the ground, just grounding in there and focusing on what surrounds you reminds us we're in our present. This is one other thing about our breath. Your breath will never lie. When you get scared, your breath will become short. It just will. It doesn't lie.
And fast.
And I think those deep breathing things, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is just reminding you, hey, 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 I'm okay. Hey, 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 you're okay. You're right here. You're with me. We're okay. We're okay. And it's just that reminder again. Now, I want to speak, even as I was saying that, I thought, because the word okay is real weird to me now. But the definition of okay is totally changed to me now. Doesn't mean things are good. Sometimes it's okay. Is that I'm okay. It's really hard. It's really sad. Okay. I'm okay. I can figure this out. It's just part of life now. And I don't want to run from it anymore. It's just where we are. One of the things that we talked about as I'm leading into the part about relational, I brought it up at the very beginning of one. Being with people in grief can bring up a lot of fear for us. We're afraid we're going to say the wrong thing. We're going to do the wrong thing. We're going to be hurtful. We want to be helpful. But there's nothing scarier than being with a grieving child, because we really don't know what to do with them. We don't want to be hurtful, want to be helpful. But sometimes those fears, I'm not my best self when I'm in fear. What about you? And sometimes I say really stupid stuff when I get in fear and when I get nervous. And then if I know I said something stupid, it makes me say something stupider. And I just make up a word. I don't know. You know, it's just not my best self. But relationally is one of those things we've got to talk about when you're dealing with grief. Grief changes relationships. Somebody say truth, isn't that right? It changes it. My very favorite Dr. Brene Brown quote is this, and I've shared with you, I read her a lot. Now I will warn you, she cusses like a sailor, but her material is really good. If you can just get through that part. My favorite quote, love and belonging are the irreducible needs of every man, of every woman, and of every child. Without love and belonging, there will always be pain and suffering. But with love and belonging, there is sacred space. Love and belonging. That's what we are hardwired by God to crave. We want to know we're loved, and we don't want to have to hustle for it. We just want to know it. And that is what is supposed to make Jesus so attractive. He loves us unconditionally. It's total love. It's total embrace and belonging. Can't you picture that being discussed as the church was being created? That's where people belong. You belong with me. You belong here. We're together. We can figure this out. Oh my goodness, it's been several years ago, pre-COVID for sure. It was in 19 because I just finished that baby cancer journey. I got to speak in San Antonio for a conference for Black women, 2,000 Black women there. It was incredible. I mean, the excitement, the energy and worship was like incredible. But we're sitting in this conference room and it was split like this. There was, an aisle right up the middle. We're at conference at tables because we were going to eat and everything in this huge room. And I'm seated at the front table. I mean, they treat you like royalty. That's just their culture. It was so beautiful. So I'm at the front table. We stand to sing. Well, I stood, and one thing I do when I'm speaking places is I always look to see, do we clap here? Do we lift hands here? I mean, kind of because I don't want to be on the front doing this and nobody behind me is doing that. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of watching what's happening. So I stood up and I'm kind of looking around. One of my friends from Tennessee walked across the room and she held me and she whispered in my ear, "Hey, you belong here." And it was so powerful for me. Don't look around the room anymore. You belong here. You belong with me. Isn't that what your soul craves? Is somebody to tell you, "Hey, we're together. You got this." But grief can feel so alone. Even when you're with other people. I was with a woman the other day that was telling me she had heard that 90% of marriages fail after the death of a child. And I told her that's a myth and it's not true. Marriages do not fail because of the death of a child. Marriages struggle after the death of a child if the partners judge the way they do grief. Different personalities. And if I couldn't learn to accept the way my husband did grief, and if he couldn't accept the way I did grief, there's going to be a problem. But rather, when we're able to negotiate and we're able to talk about it and we're able to say, I want pictures here. Well, I'd rather them be over here. We can flip that. I want to go here. Well, I wanted to go to the cemetery. Okay, who's gonna, we bend our knee to each other. Are you getting it? We float, we fluctuate in a way we hadn't done before as well as we did it in that. But we're learning, don't judge each other's grief. The way we grieve is so personal to us. And it may not even stay that way week to week with us. It may be different. And the way we feel anxiety is different. The way we struggle with the unknown. So I've got 3 quotes I'm going to give you, and all 3 of these come out of Alan Wofeld's work. Alan Wofeld, his name is on some of those grief pages that I gave you. He's a guru in the world of grief. Lots of good books on. His theory is called companioning. And it's about how in grief work, I think the subtitle is something like this. Only you can do your own grief work, but you don't have to do it alone. You got to show up. You got to do your own work. You got to get intentional about your own stuff. But you don't have to do it alone. What the research says is 100% of the people that reported getting better or feeling more safe when they cry or whatever had been part of the grief group, a grief share program, something that spoke to them. These are 3 of Alan's quotes. And I'm happy to send these to you if you need them. I can tell you how to get a hold of me later. Companioning is about being present to another's pain. It is not about taking away the pain. Now think about that. Let's talk about that for children. I teach this stuff to school counselors. It's being present for their pain, but the goal is not to take the pain away. I think you brought up so beautifully, making another feel uncomfortable when they're with you. You know, we're scared if we cry, it's going to make somebody else feel uncomfortable. And you can tell when it makes somebody else feel uncomfortable. I mean, my first Sunday back at church, I remember I started to cry and a woman came over to me and she handed me a tissue. She didn't know I brought a box with me, but she was like, no, you're going to mess up your makeup.
My goodness.
But what she was really saying is, hey, I'm not comfortable with that here.
Right.
And so I got to figure it out. Who can I? What can I? Companioning is about going into the wilderness of the soul with another human being. It is not about thinking you're responsible for finding the way out. You're not. Don't get in the Holy Spirit's way. You're not responsible for that. We just show up for each other. Do you hear how he's just saying the same thing in a different way, different words? Listen to this one. Companioning is about walking alongside. It is not about leading or being led. It's about shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm. We just did in our last time together all the other things that cause grief. So we've got death, but y'all listed a whole bunch of other things that bring up grief feelings for us. And anxiety. There's a huge difference, and I hope I can language this well, in empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is when we say things like, oh, bless your heart. Sympathy is like, can I get you something to make you feel better so you'll stop crying? Sympathy is more, we don't say it like this, but I've heard it language like this and think it might be true. Man, I'm so sad that happened to you, but so glad it's not me. Empathy is the shoulder to shoulder. Hey, I know you fell in a hole and I'm going to get in there to walk with you while we get out of it. Empathy is more about, remember what we talked about last time? It's not like event. It's like emotion. Hey, I know what that feels like. Or I think I know what that feels like. One thing that's comforting to me, and again, it may be to me, but not to somebody else. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But when somebody says, I can't imagine, and I'm like, don't even try to. It's worse than you can imagine. You don't want to go there. But I like that better than I know exactly how you feel. I want to go, no, you don't. I don't have any clue. Goodness gracious, I don't even know how I feel, you know? And even though we both buried a daughter, I don't want to, you know, I want to hear how you feel. I don't want to tell you, I know exactly how you feel and this is it.
Right.
You know, we want to be able to give voice and there's something powerful about saying our own things, our own emotion. Yes. How can we, this is a question that I'm asking and I want us to begin to take it apart. How can we establish a relationship with a mourner that provides a safe environment wherein she or he can feel free to authentically express grief without fear of judgment, without fear of isolation, or without fear of abandonment? We're not walking away because you tell me something hard. I was sharing with a couple of you the last time, and I may have even said this out loud, but I remember sitting with my husband's a preacher. We'd gone to another preacher's home and we were visiting and we had a bunch of other people were there. Well, when the meal was over, the wife said to me, stay in here with me. And everybody else went to the other room. And so we were, and we were sitting there sharing and we were both we moved our chairs away from the table. So we're kind of knee to knee. And I was leaning in towards her. And I said, I can't even begin to tell you how much fear I felt since Jenny died. You know, C.S. Lewis in his book about grief said, I didn't know grief felt so much like fear. It just can bring up a lot of stuff. And my friend was leaning in toward me and she sat up and she says, no, you don't. You do not feel fear. You are a strong Christian woman, and strong Christian women do not feel afraid. I mean, I sat up, she sat up, we talked about the weather. You know what I mean? If she wanted to talk about grief, she had a grief story too. But it was over at that point, right? I mean, it was just awkward. It was awkward at that moment. We've got to give people the movement, the strength of character to be able to hear pain. Do I like that phrase? Do I think strength of character is right? I'm okay with that language. This is what I really think. I really think it's strength from the Holy Spirit. I love the strength of my character. I think he gives us strength to hear hard things. He gives us strength to stand strong when things are coming at us that we're not sure whether to duck and cover, or whether to look at somebody and go, me too. That's how I felt. There is power in me too. I get that. I hear that. Okay, I'm going to press a pause. Does that make sense to you? Does that resonate with you? Are we together with that? Good. Okay. Something else about this. I've just got lots of bullet points here, so you may think this is real disjointed. I got a lot to tell you. I mean, this could be a whole day that we're talking about right now. In America, and it's only because this is all I know, so I'm not saying it's not in the whole world. It may be just a humanity thing, but we compare everything. We compare hair, we compare diamond size, we compare vehicles, we compare houses, we compare what our kids are doing, particularly as young children or teenagers. This is what my kid did, this is what my kid did. I mean, we compare everything. We compare who knows the Bible verse, do what?
It's everywhere. It's not just.
Yeah, we compare Bible verses. We just compare. We compare. We even compare suffering. I've had people say to me, I could never talk to you about my grief because bearing a child is the worst. And what I want to say back is, how is that helpful for either one of us? Because what that means is, how can I talk to you about my pain? Your pain is worse, so we can't walk this road together. Number one, I'm not even sure if bearing a child is the worst. I'm not sure about that. I'm not saying it's not, I'm just saying I don't know. I think the deal is, comparisons are the tool of the power of darkness. Figuring out how we can show up and walk together, that's from the power of light. That's from the power of light. How can I journey beside you? You'll even notice that with children, we'll begin to kind of play that. We'll one up pain. Got to teach them. No. We're in this together. We're the same. At the cross of Jesus, we meaning not just Christians, we meaning humanity. At the cross of Jesus, we're more same than we are different. There's more alike about us than we're differences. And the power of darkness just got us hooked on comparison, and he just won't get the bait away. So we got to learn to walk away from it, right? No comparisons, no comparisons. Another thing about children and grief. Malaya I learned so much from her when she's speaking in front of people. When she was a young teenager, I'd been invited to a convention for the superintendents and principals of our Christian schools in Texas. And so I was speaking to them about grief, and I asked Malaya if she wanted to say a few words before I started. And she said she'd love to. Well, we were in a hotel room, and I'm like, I want to hear what you're going to say. Well, I don't know yet. No, I need to know what you're going to say. I'm not putting her up there if I didn't know what you were about to say. You do it for me. Talk to me. And one of the things that she said that day in front of these people very bravely is, I wanted to talk about my mom after her death. Didn't just want to talk about the death. I want to talk about my mom. Jenny was a permanent sub. All the kids knew her, all the teachers knew her. And then Malaya was kind of that girl after she came back. You know, everybody just felt so sad for her because they all missed Jenny. I wanted to talk about my mom. I wanted to remember that she could win the burping contest. I wanted to remember funny things that she did or sweet things that she did, not just that she died. That's not the best part of Jenny. Some grievers want to retell the story over and over and over because they are verbal processors. And every time they tell the story, they're even picking up on something else new to it for them. What we're trying to do, it's like our brains are a filing cabinet drawer. And you know how you've got all these folders. But in my filing cabinet drawer, if I haven't made the file folder yet, I just put the papers on top of all the other files. And Jenny's death stayed just like that. Every time I opened my brain, I had to go through her death first to get to another thought. And so it was by telling the story and retelling the story, telling the story, being with. I'm a verbal processor. I finally found a file folder. And I think it's probably stuck under worst thing that ever happened to me, but it's filed. Sometimes it gets back out, but most of the time it can stay filed. But you're giving people a gift. Don't say, yes, you already told me that. We listen, we nod, we listen, and we're waiting to hear more things. Now, this I hear from a lot of people who love kids. This is spoken from such a sweet place in your heart. Kids or preachers. I do this a lot with youth ministers. We want to have right answers. We want to be able to speak something that somebody goes, that was helpful. And that's problematic. Because I might say one thing to Lori and she goes, oh, that is oil for my soul. I might say the exact same thing to you and you go, oh, that's the worst thing I ever heard. You know, based on what minute I said it to. I mean, it may be oil for you, painful for you, and then in the next hour it could be reversed. There are no right answers, is what I'm trying to say. There's no right answers. We show up, we listen, we hear, we're reading language. Several years ago, it's been since Jenny died for sure, but several years ago on a Sunday afternoon, my phone started lighting up. Well, I don't answer my phone if I don't know the number. I just don't answer. I wait for people to leave a voicemail. I call or message back. Nobody's leaving a voicemail, but he just call back. And I told Rick, my phone is lighting up, but I don't know this person. Well, then my husband's phone started lighting up, and Rick doesn't have my rule. He answers his phone. And he looked at me, he said, it's the game warden. He wants to talk to you. I didn't do anything. I haven't done anything. The game warden should not be after me. And so he handed me I know the game warden in our community. He said, you got to get out here. I'm at a ranch. Oh my goodness. There's a man who was having a shooting event this morning. They were target shooting. And he had his 9-year-old grandson with him. And he put the little boy behind a tree and he said, do not move. But they think maybe he had to go to the bathroom. And just his grandfather shot, he stepped out from behind the tree. And this man had already been to the hospital 2 or 3 times. He totally believed he was having a heart attack. And he said, you've got to get out here. You've got to help me. I'll be right there. Rick went with me. When I got there, the game warden got everybody out of the house. This man was hysterical, except for current wife, former wife, me, Rick, the game warden, and this man. We were in this room. And the man was leaning over it. He was crying. And I introduced myself and I began to speak to him. And I was sitting on the floor so I could be close. And he said, it's over. He will never be with his sisters at Christmas again. This was right after Christmas. And I said, you know what? But you'll be able to do things every year at Christmas that will remind you of him. That would have blessed me. That did not bless him. He started crying harder. So I looked at his wife and his former wife, and I said, y'all are going to need to remember what I'm about to do, because I think this is going to be a life skill for you. And I said his name, and I said, I want to circle back. I wish I hadn't said it like that. This is what I know. You're absolutely right. he is gone and he will not be there at Christmas. And this man sat up and he said, finally, someone that will tell me the truth. Two different things. One would have blessed me, and I was hoping it would bless him, and it didn't. But to be able, I mean, both things are right? Both things were true. They weren't opposing opinions. They were just different viewpoints on it. One thing we've got to be brave enough to do, whether it's through anxiety or through grief, is circle back. Don't walk away because it's like, well, I'm scared. I don't know what to say now. No, stay present. Stay with it. Just say something else. Or say, I'm sorry, I know that wasn't helpful. There's no words here. I don't know what to say. So I'm just going to be with you. That's okay too. People aren't locking in on your words as much as they're locking in on your presence. I don't remember half the things that were said to me. Oh, I remember a few, good and bad. Mike Cope is a friend of ours. He is a preacher, used to be well, probably still is in Abilene, lives in Abilene, also lives in Malibu because he helps with Pepperdine. But they buried a little girl a few years before Jenny died. And he called Rick between death and funerals. There's a couple things you need to know. Number one, don't ever change your bio. You will always have 3 children, which I so appreciate. But then he said this, people are going to say some really stupid stuff, but they're going to be giving you their very best. Cover them with grace and mercy. Now, every time I say that, this is what I think. Grace and mercy, grace and mercy, grace and mercy. I think of me standing under something like Niagara Falls, and it's where the noise is so loud that you can't get into my heart. I hear you, grace and mercy. I hear you, grace and mercy. Now, sometimes, maybe because I'm older, it's okay for me to say that's not helpful for me. That's okay for me to say I don't agree with that. I'm okay to challenge, but I'm okay sometimes too to just go, grace and mercy, I'm not dealing with this. But there's no reason. Let me say like this. That's a life skill. That's not just in grief. That's a life skill. A few years ago, I decided I wasn't going to be easily offended anymore. I didn't even want to be offended. I don't even say that offends me. I'm 65 years old, and I'm not going to be wimpy about people hurting my feelings. You know what I mean? I'm not going to do it anymore. Now, I have this special set of things. I try to give full warning to this, that if you attack my husband or my kids, they're out. I just can't even help myself. You know, I mean, there's nothing about spiritual discipline. They're just there. If you're brave enough to attack one of them to me, you brought it on yourself, right? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I try to keep them up there, but yeah, it's not pretty. It's just not, I have to tell y'all this. This has nothing to do with anything. It just popped in my mind. Years ago, Rick was at a church, and it's a church that didn't end well. And they wanted him not to preach from the word anymore. They wanted him to do more topical. We'd only been there a couple of years, and it just wasn't a good fit. And Rick's like, no, that's just not my style. You know, he's in the word kind of guy, really good in the word kind of guy. And so one day after church, I was talking to one of the elders, just me and him, you know, because he had told something about Rick that wasn't true. And so I was visiting with him. One of the other elders was talking to Rick, and he said, I think I better go over there. And Rick said, she'll be fine. He said, not for her, you know. I thought, yeah, I probably look like a wolf. But anyway, I think it's time for us to learn the grace and mercy. What do you think? If we don't have to be so easily offended, it's okay to say with strength, I don't agree with that. But not to say it mad and not to be rude about it. It's just, that's not my belief system. That's not my belief system. Example, and this is probably a bridge to the next one. We talk about spiritual. I don't believe God killed Jenny. I don't believe that. I think the power of darkness is in charge of death. As soon as I can get sort of settled that my daughter died, I can't get settled that Malaya's mommy did and that was God's plan. I just can't settle with that. And so I don't believe that God took her. I don't like that language, but I believe God loved her through every step of it and loved us through every step, loves us through every step of it. Just a difference. It's just a difference in language. I was afraid of my granddaughter. That would make God sound like a monster. And I think it's important. I think some of our language as adults can make to children it sound like God's a monster, and he's not. He's loving, and he's on our team. He's on our team. So no right answers. Learn to circle back, sit with curiosity, say, tell me more a lot. Grief and anxiety. This is so important for those of you teaching children and adults. Grief and anxiety. Oh, our teachers saw this during COVID. Oh, they saw this. They make it impossible to learn. It took me 6 weeks after Jenny died to be able to read again. Could not read. I could not take in new information. So that was really, I'm an avid reader. That was really 10 weeks because I took a backpack filled of books when we went to the hospital. I didn't know we were staying. I just thought I was going to sit with her while she got hydrated. I couldn't read while she was in. It's like your brain just turned to mush. My brain turned to mush. People can't learn. You can't absorb new information. But listen to this quote by Sue Johnson. Sue Johnson's a theorist. She wrote Emotionally Focused Therapy. She says, the best predictor of the impact of a trauma is not the severity of the event, but it is whether we can seek comfort in the arms of another. Let that settle for a second. The best predictor of the impact of trauma is not the severity of the event, but whether we can seek comfort in the arms of another. Fears are silenced in connection. We all feel stronger in connection. I want to remind you, I think I've said this in every session, but I think it's really important, is that we grieve because we love. Now, I started this earlier, but let me finish my point. I believe that we as Christians have been called to love harder than other people. We're empowered to do that through the Holy Spirit. Truth?
Truth.
Okay. So if we believe that, and if we believe that grief is loving, that loving is from grief, that grief is because we loved, because I loved my daughter hard, I'm going to grieve her hard. Then could that mean that we're going to grieve harder than other people? Maybe. We give ourselves permission to do that. But remember that verse, where's the verse? One of the Thessalonians. What does it say? Let me think a minute. Grieve not is the way we put that usually, is those who have no hope. Does that ring a bell? I can't remember where it is. My mind. Anyway, grieve not is those who have, but in the New Testament, well, really in the Bible, grieve particularly, there's no punctuation. So the way I would read that verse is grieve not as those who have no hope. But we've read it before as grieve not as those who have no hope. I don't think that's accurate. I think he gives us permission. Grieve. It's okay to grieve. Just don't do it without hope. Don't do it without hope. Keep your eyes fixed on hope. We're fighting for hope. Hope. Capital H, hope. Jesus. His name is Jesus. One of the things we've got to talk about as we're kind of rounding to a close here is we've got to acknowledge secondary losses. And those sometimes get ignored. Secondary losses, let me give you an example. When my dad died, I heard a noise in the front yard. He died at home. The police had come, and after the JP got there, Justice of the Peace got there, they took his body away. And then I heard noise and somebody was out mowing their yard. And it was another preacher in town and said, I just wanted to do this to serve you. And then in just a minute, his wife knocked on the door and she said, hey, I came to change sheets. I said, what's up with that? She said, I know you're going to have visitors. I just came to change your sheets. I'll take them home and wash them and I'll be right back. I'll make the beds for you. Don't even worry about it. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with, men and women, who say, I don't even know how to pay the bills. My partner always did that. That's a secondary loss. I don't know how to get on a zero turn mower. My partner did that. I don't know how to do that. My wife was the primary caretaker. And when she had a brain aneurysm, I realized my kids are 6 and 9 and I've never given them their own bath before. She always did it. And now I got to figure it out. Those are secondary losses. Are you with me? I mean, that list could go on. If we had a day workshop, I would brainstorm that with you. Jenny was my shoe shopping buddy. Same as I told you about Walmart, walking in shoe stores, turn right around and walk back out. My daughter-in-law, Casey, that year for Christmas, gave me a darling pair of shoes because she said, I know you can't shop for shoes right now. That's a secondary loss. We got to show up ready to help people so they can get their knees back under them, so they can figure it out. Secondary losses. You know, we're so wired. I picture this with young children. I picture this with mommies and daddies. Look this up online if you want to. Look up muskox in battle or whatever when you get home. It's got a great video that goes with it. When I taught first grade, I always did a unit on animals in Alaska just because they're weird. They're kind of weird looking. They have different traits. Different animals live in Alaska than anywhere else. But the muskox is one of those animals. And there's other animals that do this. None look meaner doing it than the muskox. What the muskox does is when, let's say, wolves come up on them and they're about to attack. And who they go after are the babies and the wounded. So when a muskox sees that happening, I think it's the mothers, I don't know that, or the daddy. I think the daddies start, I don't know that. But the biggest ones gather around first and they go all around tail in. So their faces out looking at that wolf going, you can't have them, not today. And then the mamas or whoever rushes in and they all get together. I mean, they're like double tiered around that wounded or the baby. Now, for the majority of my life, I was one of the muskox on the outside. I will take a bullet for the kids that I love, whether I'm teaching them or my friends' kids. I mean, I'm a mama, you know what I mean? I love kids. And then one day, I found myself on the inside. I couldn't get up. And I remember feeling deeply attacked. I remember calling Rich Ashley. He's the preacher at the Hills. He helped do Jenny's funeral. And I said, Rick, you got to help me with this. Was Jenny's death a spiritual attack? And I really believed that it was. And I'm not saying I don't believe that now, but he said something that really struck me. He said, I don't know if her death was or not, but I know in the days following it has been. I think when the power of darkness sensed that he had me scared, that he had me down, it was like, let's go get her. Let's make her doubt everything she thought was truth. Let's go get her. And then that's what I want to talk about the next time. That next 45 minutes is going to be, how do we get back up spiritually? How can you still stand? In Job, right at the end of Job 3, my first thing I read after I could finally read again was Job. I thought, Job and I had never been great friends before. But I thought, I think I want to read Job. And I was going to read him out of the Message because I thought that's a little different. It'll sound different to me. Right at the end of chapter 3, it says this: the worst of my fears has come true. What I've dreaded most has happened. There is no peace. There is no rest. Death has invaded life. And I closed the book and I stood up. I said, that's it, Lord. That's it. I've never known a peaceless day in my whole life until 6 weeks ago. And I can't find it. I can't find peace. This is how I feel. And it was like the Lord just started flooding me with, oh, my daughter. That was Job speaking from his place of pain. You're filled with the Holy Spirit. And where my spirit is, there is what? Peace. Open the eyes of your heart and look for the glimpses of peace that I will give you. And so frequently, I still pray. I prayed already today. Give me glimpses of your peace. Give me glimpses of your peace. I haven't had a whole day. That's probably not true. I'm probably having more whole days of it now. But I still have days that I just get glimpses. But I haven't had one day not with any glimpses. You with me? I've had glimpses every day since then. Open the eyes of your heart. If you're starving, if you're thirsty for peace, let's go hunting. Let's look for it. Let's be in stillness. Let's practice the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get still. Look for peace. Look for peace. I got a verse I want to speak over you as we close, and then we'll take a 15-minute break and get back together. How's that? Really, a 12-minute break. We'll get back together. Okay. Romans 15:13. This was Jenny's life verse, and now it's mine. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. All right, we'll take a break.